When you think of ancient Egypt, I'm guessing your mind probably jumps straight to the pyramids, right? To Tutankhamun, to the great pharaohs. But what came before all of that? To really get how that incredible civilization even began, we have to rewind the clock. We're talking thousands of years, to a time of massive change called the Neolithic. Let's get into it. So, we're about to go on a journey way back in time, into a version of Egypt that you probably wouldn't even recognize. This is an Egypt before it was a unified kingdom, a landscape without a single monumental tomb in sight. But this is the place where the seeds, the foundational ideas of Egyptian civilization, were just starting to sprout. Okay, our story starts with a real head-scratcher. It's found deep in what is now one of the driest, most hostile places on Earth. At a site called Nabta Playa, archaeologists stumbled upon this, a small, mysterious circle of stones. Turns out, it's an ancient astronomical observatory, a kind of cosmic clock. And its location alone makes you ask a very, very strange question. I mean, really, think about it. How on earth did one of the oldest astronomical sites we know of end up here, in the middle of nowhere? The people who built this, they needed water, they needed food, and they needed a pretty good reason to be tracking the stars so carefully. So what were they doing in a place that today can barely support any life at all? Well, the answer changes literally everything you think you know about the Sahara. It turns out the Sahara wasn't always a desert, not even close. For thousands of years, during a period scientists call the African humid period, the climate was completely different. Stronger summer monsoons pushed way farther north, and they transformed this vast sandy landscape into a savanna, full of grasslands and seasonal lakes. So, before this big climate shift, life in this part of the world was basically confined to the Nile Valley. You can see it right here. All those little red dots, the human settlements, they're all huddled right along the river. It was the only reliable lifeline in a really dry world. But then, the rains came. And look what happens between 8,500 and 7,000 BCE. It's a dramatic expansion. Those red dots start spreading out to the west, pushing into what was becoming a green desert. People were basically following the water, setting up shop around these new savannas and lakes. And by 7,000 BCE, you're looking at the peak of the Green Sahara. Just look at that map. Widespread settlement, right across what is now totally barren desert. These Neolithic communities, they weren't just scraping by. They were absolutely thriving. So, what was their secret? How did they pull this off? Well, they were part of this huge global transformation we call the Neolithic Revolution. And this wasn't just one single invention. It was a whole new way of life. It included 1, food production, domesticating animals and plants. 2, more permanent settlements. 3, cool new technologies like pottery. And finally, number 4, totally new social structures and complex ritual. Which brings us right back to where we started, Nabta Playa. This site is going to be our first case study. It's an amazing window into the lives of the people who built that cosmic clock right in the middle of the Green Sahara. The people who lived here had what we'd call semi-permanent villages. They built these cool circular huts out of brush and reeds, they dug these really deep wells to get water, and they basically organized their whole lives around the seasonal rhythm of the playa. That's a natural basin that would fill up with water every rainy season. And get this, they were here for a long time. This was not some short-lived experiment. We're talking thousands of years. It starts out with small, mobile camps. Then it evolves into more organized villages with wells and storage pits. And finally, in the late Neolithic, we see the real game changers, herding cattle and building these incredible stone monuments, these megaliths. Now, the most famous of these monuments is, of course, the calendar circle. Researchers are pretty sure it was aligned to mark the sunrise on the summer solstice. So why was that so important? Well, the solstice was the big signal that the life-giving monsoon rains were on their way. This wasn't just some abstract stargazing. It was a critical survival tool, a calendar for the most important event of their entire year. But their beliefs went way beyond the stars. Archaeologists also found these young cattle very carefully buried under stone mounds. And they weren't butchered for food. No, they were interred whole as ritual offerings. This is the earliest evidence for a cattle cult in all of Africa. And it's a fascinating hint of the sacred animals we see thousands of years later in pharaonic religion. Okay, let's switch gears. While the cattle herders of Nabta Playa were busy building megaliths down in the south, A totally different kind of society was popping up hundreds of kilometers to the north, in a place called the Fayum Depression. Meet Egypt's very first farmers. So, what's the difference here? Well, it's pretty stark. The Nabta Playa folks were desert pastoralists who developed their own local rituals and became monumental builders. The Fayum people, on the other hand, were lakeside farmers. They had a really mobile lifestyle, and, this is key, their main food crops weren't native to Egypt at all. You know, when archaeologists started digging at the Fayum sites, they found a bit of a mystery. They found lots of hearths and trash pits, but it's what they didn't find that's so telling. No permanent houses, no village walls, no formal streets. It was clearly a settlement, but not like any we'd normally picture. And the reason is, these were mobile farmers. They didn't build permanent villages because they were always on the move, following the seasons. They lived in light, easy-to-build shelters, probably made of reeds. They just followed the resources around this huge ancient lake, fishing, hunting, and tending their little farm plots. But they did leave behind one incredibly important thing: hundreds and hundreds of storage pits, or granaries. These were basically round pits, sometimes lined with basketry, where they would store all their surplus grain. And these simple pits, they're a revolutionary clue. So why are a bunch of holes in the ground so important? Because these granaries are the very first evidence we have for planned agricultural surplus in Egypt. This is the beginning of storing food for later, of producing more than you need just to get by day to day. And that, my friends, is a foundational step for any complex society. And here's the final twist in the Fayum story. The crops they were storing, this emmer wheat and barley, they aren't native to Africa at all. The plants and the knowledge of how to grow them were imported all the way from the Fertile Crescent in Southwest Asia. So it turns out Egypt's agricultural revolution was actually an import. So what do we have? Two very different stories, right? You've got the cosmic cattle herders of Nabta Playa on one side and the mobile crop-importing farmers of the Fayum on the other. So how do these two completely separate threads weave together to create the foundation of pharaonic Egypt? Well, each group brought something absolutely essential to the table. From the Fayum farmers, you get the whole concept of food surplus and the actual crops to make it happen. From the Nabta Playa builders, you get the social organization needed for big projects, plus this deep tradition of ritual and cosmic belief centered on cattle in the stars. And then, climate change played the final decisive hand. After 4500 BCE, the monsoons got weaker, and the Sahara started drying up again, forcing all these innovative cultures out of the desert. And where did they go? They all migrated to the one place that still had water year-round, the Nile Valley. And here, all these different people, with their different ideas and technologies, all came together. It created this amazing cultural melting pot that would become the basis for what we call pre-dynastic Egypt. So, when you put it all together, the Neolithic period gave Egypt the essential toolkit for civilization: food surplus, complex social organization, and a powerful set of beliefs about the cosmos. Which leaves us with one last big question to chew on. Without these forgotten innovators of the Green Sahara, would the pyramids ever have been possible?